Hello there everyone, Hazmy here with yet another Pathfinder video, and in this one we're going to be talking about what is the best difficulty in the game, or rather what difficulty I do recommend for people to play with. Of course, before we go into any deeper into this topic, of course the best difficulty is the one that you enjoy playing with and the difficulty that you like. No one is trying to argue that. I'm not trying to convince anyone of what difficulty to play. So of course, if you do like a difficulty, that's the one you should play, and that's what you should have fun with, no matter what anyone, including me, says. Now, in this video, on the other hand, I would like to discuss my opinion and my views on the difficulty system that Owlcat has introduced. First of all, big props to them for introducing us to a really vast difficulty system. It's fantastic. Everyone can just shape the difficulty to their liking and to the difficulty system that they enjoy. So in the end, the best difficulty, so to say, is custom difficulty, where you can just create whatever difficulty you enjoy the most or whatever you want to enable. In the end, screw achievements. They're not really that valuable. Go with the difficulty that you enjoy. But first, I would like to start with what difficulties I recommend for people who are about to start the game. For that, I would like to explore the same topic that we discussed back at the launch of Pathfinder Kingmaker, which a lot of people ask is, what difficulty is the closest to the tabletop system? Long story short, the answer is none of them. Why is that? Because Owlcat Games is introducing and implementing the system of Pathfinder in a unique way, and it's not exactly one-to-one to the tabletop rule set, so it's not going to work exactly the same way. Also, the Dungeon Master is not a live person but a computer, and they're designing the game for hundreds of thousands to millions of players and millions of different playthroughs, and it's just impossible really to choose a difficulty that works with everyone. In tabletop, the Dungeon Master can always shape the difficulty to his liking and to the group's liking, so they can just change the numbers on the fly. And that's what really the rulebook is. It's just a guideline that these are the monsters and feel free to play with them how you like. So overall, there is no difficulty that I would recommend if you're trying to go for a core difficulty, because there's none, despite the game having a core difficulty, but we'll discuss that later. So instead, how would I recommend starting out the game with? Of course, story difficulty is there for people who just want to explore the story, have no problem going through the game, and you just want to explore this fantasy world and see the story for yourself. If you enjoy it, go for it. For people, on the other hand, that have never played Pathfinder, the video game, and you have never even explored Pathfinder as the tabletop game, or you're not even familiar with D&D, is the difficulty I would recommend, which is casual. Despite what some people might say, that normal difficulty is fine, I honestly recommend casual difficulty for you if you've never ever played the Pathfinder game and you are absolutely no idea about the tabletop system either. This difficulty is going to be very efficient for you because you're still going to have fun without actually constantly dying and getting heavily punished for not knowing the game, and you're still going to be learning everything that you need to learn. You're going to learn exactly at the same pace as if you would be playing on core, but actually you're going to have fun and success most of all. Why is that? Because Pathfinder and CRPGs are frankly games of knowledge. They're not about skill, they're not about reflexes, they're not about knowing how to play the game exactly. It's about knowing the mechanics. It's about knowing and memorizing hundreds to thousands and thousands of lines of mechanics, spells, abilities, combinations of classes, and the whole Pathfinder system. And there's really no easier way to go about it. It's going to take you hundreds of hours to learn the basics of the game and even to learn how to do everything in the game. I have overall, I think, 1,500 hours in the 2 Pathfinder games, and I'm still learning every single day. There's something new I'm learning, and the learning never really stops. So for this very reason, I wouldn't the naming is just horrible. Don't feel bad about playing on casual. It is actually the difficulty I recommend for people who never played these games. It's going to be the perfect difficulty for you to learn. Moving on, I would actually have loved if they moved the warning of not recommended for players not familiar with the Pathfinder system from core to normal. I would absolutely would have put this here so that they would have recommended you to play on casual, because normal difficulty, in my opinion, is already for people who are somewhat familiar with Pathfinder from the tabletop version, but you have never played the Pathfinder video games. The reason for this is that normal does disable critical strikes and enables death's door, so your characters will not die immediately when their constitution falls, when their damage falls below their constitution, and they're going to wake up at the end of the battle. So you're not going to be severely punished for not knowing how the dungeon master, in this case Alcat, designs their game, because they have their very specific and frankly harsh enemy and encounter design. And you will be able to learn through even your own mistakes, but you're still going to have a very good challenge. Daring difficulty is in between normal and core. I wouldn't like to talk about it too much. We're going to get into that later. So let's talk first about core difficulty, because core difficulty is, in my opinion, the difficulty for actual veterans of the Pathfinder video game. If you have played many playthroughs even for Pathfinder Kingmaker, or if you have played a lot of the tabletop system as well, and you've played the beta for this game, then core difficulty is for you. It's going to be highly challenging, it's going to be harsh, and you're going to have multiple encounters in the game that is frankly going to kick your ass. It is a difficulty where you need to know how Alcat is designing their game and how the tabletop experience is translated and implemented in the video game. Mistakes here are already going to be highly punished. You're not going to have death's door, and lots of the fights are just going to be very harsh, frankly, and you will need to have a good party. And despite that's what hard difficulty says here, that you need to know the implementation of Pathfinder system in this game, that's already what core is. That's already what you need to know, and you're gonna be heavily punished if you don't know how the system works. And it's a very tough difficulty. And for this is why I haven't talked about daring, because it is an in-between. Daring difficulty is very good if you have dabbled in Kingmaker and you know somewhat more of the game, but you're not very comfortable by, making very good characters and you want to refresh your memory on how the game works. Or if potentially this is your first time, but you're somewhat comfortable with a little bit harder experience, so you don't want it to go too smooth, then daring is also for you. So like daring is this, you're not very sure about you can handle core, or if you're a little bit more encouraged or braver than just playing on normal, then daring difficulty is probably the well-balanced difficulty to have a very good first playthrough of the game. And with that said, for a very first playthrough, I straight up, after 5 playthroughs on multiple difficulties, frankly, I just wouldn't recommend core difficulty, straight up, for anyone, except if you're specifically looking for a high challenge, and if it's something that you specifically want and you don't mind reloading. And that turns us into the next part of this video, where I would like to talk about why and how the difficulty system in the game works, and just how the game works and how our CRPGs. Now, in this game, the way they implemented difficulty is very weird, in my opinion at least, because there is only one major change option that you can play with, and that is the enemy stat adjustments, which is weaker or stronger enemies with multiple options. Now, what you need to know about these is that they decrease the enemy's attack bonuses, armor class, but also their attributes. And if you know the system, then you can already see what the problem with that is. The problem is that these stats are double dipping. So if you are increasing the difficulty in the game, then you are going to get, let's say on hard, a +4 to all the enemy's attributes from strength to charisma, and also +4 to their armor class and their attack bonuses. And they are combined, as in you get +4 on their attack bonuses and the +2 because they also get +4 to strength. The same with armor class, +4 armor class and +2 because they get +4 dexterity. So they're double dipping, and the same goes for all saving throws. Why is this a problem? And unfair is even higher. Why is this a problem? That is because overall the tabletop systems of the game are playing around mathematics, around dice, and just numbers straight up. All enemies have their planned weaknesses, all characters have their strengths and weaknesses, and spells are designed in a way that, to put it just straight, they have their maximum capabilities. And if you boost the numbers too high, they're just not going to work. That's how it works. That's how the system is. If you're increasing the numbers too high, then a good 70% of the game is going to be completely useless. A good example is that the way they balance the game, enemies have very high levels, and every single spell in the game, frankly, that uses the hit dice requirement, which is in the spells only work against a specific level, those just don't work straight up. And it's the same goes for abilities that get negated with saving throws. So any difficulty above core, in my opinion, is straight up not worth it because I don't think they are good difficulties. Of course, there are lots of people enjoying them, and they're very good challenges, especially if you do like to balance very overpowered and min-max and optimized characters. They're a very good challenge, but in my opinion, not very good difficulties because instead of actually making the game harder, they are limiting the game. And the higher the numbers, the less choices you can actually make in a role-playing game where, frankly, creativity and your different options should be the main reason you play these games. So, but I don't want to go too into that. I don't want to convince anyone. I personally, because of that, don't recommend hard and unfair difficulty at all. So instead, what do I recommend, and why do I think all the difficulties above them, below them, are actually way better difficulties? The reason is that unlike increasing stats causing a lot of problems in the game, decreasing stats does not. It does make the game easier, but it does not prevent you from learning how the game works. It does not prevent you from killing enemies. It does not make spells not work. In fact, it enables you to use as many mechanics of the game as you can, and they're going to work. While you can say they're going to be easier, that is true, but because of this, is why I said casual difficulty is a very good difficulty, you will be still able to use lots of creative options in the game to battle your opponents. And especially if you're not very experienced with the game, you will still recognize these weaknesses and their strengths, and you can work around them. Additionally, if you're lowering the difficulty of the game, you can also make sure that your characters are not too min-maxed and not optimized. You can make characters which have unoptimal and bad stats for role-playing. You can create multi-classes and dual classes, or play different subclasses and archetypes from the game that are not the strongest, and they're still going to give you a specific challenge to play the game, despite playing on a lower difficulty. Now I know what you might be saying. Hey, Hazmy, that makes no sense. You just said increasing the stats is horrible, but you're saying that you can just lower the stats of your characters. Isn't that the same? You're just pointless. You're just a hypocrite. No. Why is that? Because if you increase the difficulty of the game, the enemy's stats all around will get better. Their saving throws, their armor class, and their attack bonuses all increase. If you're making a worse character, that's not the case. Your attack bonus might be lower, or your armor class will get a little bit lower, or your spell DC is going to get lower, or your saving throws are going to get lower. You're only going to be decreasing certain aspects of your character's effectiveness. Not everything. You're not just becoming a god, or you're not just becoming a gimped character. It is a selective and controlled environment on why your character is going to be weaker. Whereas increasing the difficulty, that's why I think that shouldn't be the way they put the option in. It's just an all-around increase. Higher saving throws, higher stats, higher bonuses, higher difficulty class on their spells. The higher difficulty class, that's breaking the whole system, right? So either way, I could talk about this for ages. Overall, in my opinion, the best way to play the game is, if you're a first timer, is probably casual. Long story short is casual if you never played the Pathfinder game, normal if you play the tabletop but not the video games, and probably daring difficulty if you have played them before. Core difficulty if you're feeling rather brave and if you're experienced with the Pathfinder video game system. And if you're looking for a bigger challenge in the game, potentially I would recommend to create more role-playing characters, or potentially boost even the enemy's damage. Even that might be a little bit better, or give yourself challenges through character creation, or limit yourself with what you can do. I personally only play on core difficulty myself, and challenge myself by not allowing myself to use certain very overpowered abilities in the game, such as Last End, or by playing no reload challenges so I cannot reload my games. Additionally, I like to roleplay specific characters and go for thematics and role-playing backgrounds for my characters that are more about a story and a role-playing aspect than making the most overpowered character. And this way, my characters are just balanced, not too on the strong side and not too on the weak side, and I can still play around creatively around the system that the game offers me. But I do avoid hard and unfair difficulty specifically because I don't think it's the right way to balance a CRPG. To increase the numbers of the enemies all around, removing their weaknesses and just straight up boosting them to unreasonable levels where the whole D&D and Pathfinder games balance just breaks, I think is the worst way of increasing the challenge, except if you specifically want to challenge yourself by creating a very powerful build, just theory crafting wise, in which case it can be good. Nonetheless, that is what I wanted to talk about. Let me know what you think about the difficulties of these games, and if overall this video helped you choose what difficulty you should play. Nonetheless, thank you very much for watching. I do stream on Twitch every single day, so feel free to check out for some more CRPG content. And as always, I'll see you all the next time.